Matthew Knott from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age has a question.
Hi, Mr. Keating. I'll ask two parts if I could. You've been extremely critical today of the Albanese government, including Ministers Richard Marles and Penny Wong. Are you concerned that your comments today could represent a fundamental rupture with the party? You've already said that the Prime Minister hasn't responded to your request to brief him on this. And secondly, you have a tremendous skill for invective and criticism. Could I ask you now to turn some of that to the Chinese Communist Party and its treatment of Uyghurs, for example, its treatment of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong? Will you be similarly critical of them as you are of people in your own party and journalists?
After what you co-wrote with Hartcher last week in that shocking presentation in the Herald on Monday, Tuesday, and when you should hang your head in shame, I'm surprised you even have the gall to stand up in public and ask such a question, frankly. You know, you ought to do the right thing and drum yourself out of Australian journalism, you know. I mean, that's the most egregious, the worst, the most biased presentation. You pick up four specialists. You could have picked up John McCarthy, a long-term specialist, Alan Gingell. You pick up four China hawks, the biggest of them all, Jennings, you know, Davina Lee. These are all China hawks. You represent them to your community as having an independent view, where you know full well that you've selected them to do this thing. And here you are asking me about Uyghurs, and you're asking me about, if I said to you, and I did say when I saw her last time, here's the Prime Minister over, there's everyone over to India, not one question from any one of you about Modi shutting in the Muslims in Kashmir, in the pro-Hindu policies. Nothing.
But there is still a question, Mr. Keating, about the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs.
Yeah, well, look, the treatment of the Uyghurs, I'm not to defend China about the Uyghurs. I mean, there's disputes about what the nature of the Chinese affront to the Uyghurs are. There's a dispute about that. But one thing we can't be sure of, what if the Chinese said, but look, what about deaths in custody of Aboriginal people in your prison system? You know, wouldn't that be a valid point for them? Wouldn't it be a valid point? In other words, great power diplomacy cannot be about reaching down into the low social entrails of these states any more than they can with us, you know. But the Sydney Morning Herald, frankly, has lost. It's a newspaper without integrity, and the Age follows it in. Poor little, like a little pup running behind, you know. I mean, if I were you, mate, I'd hide my face and never appear again.
For the record, Mr. Keating, we're very proud of our journalism, and you know we think that's made an important contribution to the national debate. But can I just clarify? Do you think that it really is in dispute about what China has been doing in Xinjiang? It's been very well chronicled by the United Nations, which issued a detailed report last year.
Let me ask you: what do you believe Modi and his Hindu party is doing to the Muslims in Kashmir?
Have you got a view on that? A question about China back to one about India.
Because you're not honest enough to recognise that the guy you support, Modi, has the same sort of problems as the Chinese have. You know,
we've reported on problems in India as well, but we're talking about China.
No, you don't. You're all a soft touch on India. That's the truth of it.
Just while we're waiting for Maeve Bannister from AOP to ask you a question, could I just follow up on Matthew's question about whether you're concerned about a break with the party?
The party. When I saw Anthony Albanese he asked me to Kirribilli about a couple of months ago before he saw Xi Jinping. I was the last person to talk to him before he saw Xi Jinping at the G20. And I said, these issues are so big, Anthony. It's a case for me of country before party. You know, I'm not going to have Australia's long-term strategic interests compromised by rubbish in the Labor Party, you know, an understanding, you know, of the issues. In other words, you know, I would have expected him from the left and Penny Wong from the left to have stood up with a position. Look at Labor's great history in China. Gough recognising China in 1972. Hawke was Hu Yabeng, you know, the Chinese Party secretary, and Xiao Ziyang, the premier, you know. the APEC leaders, the APEC meeting. I did the APEC leaders meeting. I talked the Chinese into sitting down with Hong Kong and Taiwan. Could you imagine any of these people getting the Chinese to sit down in APEC with these people? And then there's I then did the deal with Indonesia. Kevin Rudd did the East Asia Summit. You know, we've got this huge, proud history. But Wong drops the whole thing. She drops the whole thing 5 years ago, not to be running a small target policy. There's no way I'm going to let the Liberals wedge me on national security because I'm on the same. Look, I'll tell you a little story. Harcher wrote a book and asked on the back for comments, and Penny Wong was going to attend the book launch with Maurice Payne and was going to add the comments to the back jacket of the book. So I discussed and remember, she's the shadow foreign minister and Harcher is the enfant terrible of this debate, right? She's turning up with that. So I had a discussion with Gareth Evans and Bob Carr about this, and I said, you've got to tell her if she goes to the launch and she puts something in the back of the book, I'm into her. And I think Carr is too. And so she didn't. But you see, this is a small target thing. This is where we've got to, in her administration of the policy. You know, it's terrible.